You're listening to episode 177 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Author and Zen Buddhist Matthew Bortolin joins us to speak about his book, The Dharma of Star Wars. It's safe to say that many of us live a very rich fantasy life. It may be personal ruminations, books, or movies. We identify with some characters, we admire others, or have an aversion, however fun that may be, with others. These fantasy worlds, situations, and beings all impact us, and their creators can be communicating to us some deeper meaning. Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, was a humanist, and that series had episodes which promoted humanist values even in alien cultures. Equality was inherent in that humanism, as the first scripted interracial kiss on American television was on Star Trek. Star Wars, it is easy for Buddhists to see, borrows heavily from our tradition, most clearly in Yoda. But it's not just that. Buddhist principles exist throughout the saga. However we view the entertainment of fantasy, Star Wars is a cultural phenomenon, and one that has direct bearing on Buddhism. Matthew Bortolin is an ordained Zen Buddhist and Star Wars fan. In The Dharma of Star Wars, he explains the principles and practices of Buddhism through the words and actions of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Yoda, and other characters. The book also examines the underlying philosophical ideas of Star Wars from a Buddhist perspective. So sit back, relax, and have a nice bantha milk. Yes, that's the blue stuff Aunt Beru pours out for breakfast. And our guest today is Matthew Bortolin. Matthew, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we're here today to talk with you about your book, Dharma of Star Wars. And I got to say, it is one of my favorite books because it combines science fiction and the Dharma. So we'll get into that, but let's start by having you tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I might have a little interesting background compared to some. I was introduced to Buddhism when I was 10 years old. I have a Catholic background, but I have an older brother who's 10 years older than me, and he really got interested in Eastern spirituality and philosophy and meditation and so forth about the time he went to college. So he was sending me books and coming home from school and talking to me about all this stuff when I was really young, and needless to say, I didn't get any of it, and I was really pretty confused by it all. But I dabbled around with meditation and read the books and, tried it out for a few years until I was probably about 16, and then I just threw it all away. It wasn't right. Timing wasn't right for me. But in my early 20s, I got back into it with a gusto, and my brother actually had been training with some people up in Santa Barbara, near where I live, in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, a teacher named Larry Ward and Piggy Rowe. And he introduced me to them, and I started meditating with that group and practicing with them, and visiting the monasteries in Escondido, California, and over in France. And in the meantime, my brother got ordained as a Zen teacher in the Soto Zen tradition, and so he continued to kind of be a guiding force for me. And so I had the Rinzai tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh and the Soto Zen tradition from my brother, and I kind of practiced both. In 2004, I received ordination in the Order of Interbeing, Thich Nhat Hanh's core community. And I've been leading groups off and on since then in the Ventura area and practicing regularly.
It's interesting. You and your brother both found resonance with Buddhist teaching. Was there a particular thing that you're aware of that introduced him to it? Because you had that guidance, but where might it have come from for him?
You know, I don't know actually. I've never really talked to him about it. It just struck a chord with him in college. I really don't know. He was really interested in Taoism and Zen, and he went to India. I was probably the mid '80s, searching, finding Bede Griffiths. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was kind of a teacher that kind of mingled all sorts of stuff together, Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity, and so he just went off and looked for everything. I think he just kind of found that Zen was the most practical of everything he discovered, and has stuck to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, with the rest of your family, with the two of you pursuing this different background and tradition from what your heritage may have been, or how do they respond to that?
Oh, pretty ambivalently. Not much, not much care. A little bit. I think a little bit of concern. Just because it's unfamiliar. Especially when you're going off to monasteries for weeks or months on end. There's that kind of maybe. I'm projecting here a little bit, but maybe a little bit of fear that there's like cultism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're going to come back with a vacant stare and white robes. And,
which I sometimes do when I get back from retreat, so I can understand that.
Right. So, no, I think they handle it pretty well. I mean, my dad is, full-blooded Italian Catholic. First language was Italian, so this stuff's all just probably kind of really weird to him. And then the rest of my family, because there's 5 kids. My brother's the second oldest, and I'm the youngest. And the others just, I don't know. Really, they don't seem to care too much. I don't really force it on them or talk about it much. And so there.
I imagine that openness helps the situation.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I don't have to feel like I can't share my life with my family. Yeah, it's nice.
Okay, good. Well, then shifting things, so you've gotten your ordination then, and this is all prior to the book. So how does Star Wars start to creep into the story?
Well, Star Wars crept into the story in 1977.
With the rest of us.
3 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 3 years old, and I believe, I've kind of given it some thought, but I believe my earliest memory was sitting in the dark theater and seeing the logo of Star Wars go up on the screen. And, and then the soundtrack kick in, and then the crawl comes up. And I just lived, breathed, and bled Star Wars since that time. I've, had the toys and gotten all the re-releases in the theaters and just been obsessed with Star Wars. And so for me, most of my life was viewed through the lens of Star Wars. As I would try to make sense of the world, relationships, history, philosophy, and so forth. It was always through Star Wars. So it was natural for me to write this book because, this was my love, my new love in this philosophy, in my mid-20s was Buddhism, and it just, for me to make sense of it, for me to even converse about it, it had to be through Star Wars. But the real kicker was, do you know Noah Levine?
I do. He's been on the
Dharma
podcast
punk?
before, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Noah and I have a mutual friend, Eric, and I was thinking about, writing this book, and Eric introduced me to Noah when Noah was still working on his first book. And so I talked to him, and he was telling me, punk rock and Buddhism and so forth. And I thought to myself, well, if this guy can do it about punk rock and Buddhism, I've got to be able to do it about Star Wars and Buddhism. And so I really owe Noah giving me the kind of kick in the pants to get going on it, and indirectly. And then he actually helped me get an agent too, as well. So Noah was a big help for me.
What a wonderful connection to have, and Noah's a terrific teacher as well.
Oh, he's a fantastic teacher. I really loved. He was one of the first people I met that kind of talked my talk, so to speak. He talked, the language of Generation X and younger folks, and I really took to it. And I don't know, just his whole. I don't have the tattoos, and I'm not, didn't really have the punk rock, but everything about Noah just made me feel comfortable and made me feel that I could talk about Buddhism in my way, my geeky way, Star Wars. And so I actually set about writing the book in 2003, prior to my ordination, right after episode 2 had come out. And I had written about half of it, and then I went on a winter retreat in Plum Village. And between freezing to death, I kind of put the rest together in my head and in a notebook. I had mistakenly gone to the south of France thinking it would be like Southern California in the winter without the proper clothing. So and there's not a lot of heating there in the old stone buildings in France, so I was pretty cold. But by early 2004, I had the book written and got an agent through Noah. We shopped it around for about a year, and we had two pretty decent, larger publishing houses interested in it, and we went through the process, and we got to the 11th hour, and both times it got nixed because apparently, according to the higher ups, religion and pop culture don't mix. So yeah. So I ended up with Wisdom Publication and a great editor named Josh Bartok, and I was really happy to be with them. I was glad to have a Buddhist publisher, and so we actually sat on the book for quite some time after that, right up until the time episode 3 was coming out. So we released the book about a week before that to get all the publicity and so forth. And yeah.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, the timing was just so perfect for it, and I'd been thinking, and one quite easily sees connections with the things Yoda says, for example, and Buddhist ideas. And so I saw that, I'm like, oh, good, finally somebody wrote the book. it's there and available for people. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So in the process of putting the book together, you're freezing in France, and you're thinking about Buddhist concepts and Star Wars. What stands out most for you? I mean, you got some low-hanging fruit with Yoda, but there's more to it than that. Tell us some other things that you found.
Other than Yoda, I really enjoy the story of Anakin Skywalker, and it's portrayed a lot as a redemption story. But I see also in that is that here's a guy who grows up as a slave and has developed a lot of fear from living in slavery his whole life, and I imagine that he has to fear that he's going to be sold at any time or beaten or blown up, as he says in the first movie, and he through that fear he develops this kind of strong urge to control his life, to control things around him. And we see that play out in the second and third movie where he wants to fix things. He says he can fix things and save people from dying, and it's the thing that ultimately, this fear of losing what he loves and not being able to control the world around him, ultimately leads him into the dark side. And the dark side is described as suffering, and I talk about that in my book a lot, about how the concept of suffering is a lot like the dark side, being trapped by this dark side element. And so Anakin falls to the dark side and has this life of suffering. And it's not until the end, when we reach Return of the Jedi, the end of his story, that he's actually confronted by someone who shows him compassion and shows him love in his son, Luke. And I think that there's a moment where Luke can kill Vader, and instead of doing so, he throws his lightsaber aside and tells the Emperor that he won't do it. He won't turn to the dark side. And to me, there's that moment where Vader, is shown compassion, and that compassion awakens in him. And I just think in terms of our lives, we have so little control over what we do. There's so many. We're born with certain genetic map and our biology and our past experience. All this karma, and all this karma is pushing us in a certain direction. And I see that with Anakin, Darth Vader. He has all this karma pushing in this direction of evil. He's made all these choices in his life from going from a slave to enslaving the galaxy, destroying planets and so forth. Yeah, we come to this critical moment, and he's able to make a choice. And we have the freedom of this moment right now. We have the freedom to make a choice to go a different direction. And he does. I mean, he makes the choice to save his son and thus save the galaxy. And that was always a real important scene for me, not just because it's the culmination of Anakin's story, but also for me personally. And I look at my life, and I look at the choices I've made. I look at the degree of control I have over my own life, and it gives me strength. It gives me strength and hope, I guess, to that for myself, that I can at any time, make a choice, that I'm not ruled by these past actions, and I can, I'm the culmination of them, but I'm also free in this moment to make a choice. And I can make the choice, for a more productive life, more helpful, more kind life, and or to show someone compassion when I might not feel it exactly, but I can choose to show compassion and work for the betterment of other people and myself.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the choice. I end every podcast episode with every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. And the moment you're referring to in the movies, it's, there's the battle between the two, and there's a great deal of tension, and you see this in Luke as well. It's fighting, there's fear, there's anger, there's all of that. And then at that moment you described, where I was like, no, I won't, and he tosses away the lightsaber, that's the first moment during that entire interaction between the two that he's let go, that he is now relaxed, that he is now open. And that's you can watch the very stature of Mark Hamill change in that moment, and I see that as a very inspirational moment, and Vader, Anakin, makes that choice as well. And granted, he does it in a Vader-esque way. His first compassionate act is killing someone. It's killing the Emperor. He's still killing someone, one step at a time, one step at a time. But he makes that choice, and the thing that most resonated with me about that sequence that you're describing is that here is a character who has been going on this path for so long. He is the boogeyman in the sci-fi world. He's it. And yet he was still able to make a decision and change direction.
Right. It's always, that's such a beautiful story to me, because I think maybe from my Catholic upbringing, I've always been interested in the savior story, the hero's journey, so to speak. But this one's got a twist to it. Here's the savior who was also the dark one, and I just always found that really fascinating growing up. And also what's interesting is like Luke's on that very verge of making the same choice that Anakin made 20-some years prior. Anakin wants to because of his fear of losing the ones he loves, he wants to control things and get this power, this dark side power, to be able to stop people from dying and make the galaxy the way he wants it to be. And Luke is right on the same verge because he sees his friends, or he believes that his friends are all dying. Out on Endor, Han and Leia are going to get killed by the Emperor's troops, and out in space, all his starfighter buddies are all getting shot down, and he's given this choice, turn to the dark side, kill Vader, join the Emperor, and all this will stop. And so it's a culmination of not just Vader's arc, but also Luke's. And it's the best moment. And then he's also, to add more to it, he's also has been encouraged by Obi-Wan and Yoda to kill the Emperor. They want him to kill Vader. They want him to confront Vader. So even from his so-called the good side, he's getting this push to kill, and but he still makes that choice. Luke shuts off his lightsaber and tosses it aside.
Yeah, a lot of people miss that he is also saying no to his teachers because he's not going to do that violent act because he knows that that's just wrong. He's not going to do it. And there's a very important component to that I'm glad you brought up, because a lot of people miss that. Sometimes we do get directions from people we admire or texts or ideological stances or whatever that we need to pay attention to what is perhaps very subtle conflict with our own ethical sense, and still make a decision that one perhaps being even harder, because the teachers are also saying, yeah, you need to go kill Vader.
Yeah, he really had to be really grounded there and centered on what he was there for. And he was there to really to rescue his dad. That was his sense, to go in there and say he still felt sense good in his father, and he wanted to save him. And that's admirable too.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift a little bit over to some conceptual stuff. In one of the chapters of the book, you talk a bit about nirvana, and you examine that, and you do some comparing of that with the Force, and you try to clarify during that about what nirvana is and isn't for a non-Buddhist audience. Can you tell us a little bit about that comparison and what you said there?
Yeah, that comparison, I felt it was necessary to put in. It was a bit of a stretch, but I was trying to give frame some idea for people unfamiliar with Buddhism about the concept of nirvana. And basically, we know that the Force is described as an energy field surrounded by all living beings, that surrounds all living beings, that penetrates, binds us, and binds the galaxy together. So I'm fudging that line up. But we know that it's everywhere. Yoda says it's between the tree, the rock, and between the ship and the land, and it's created by life. So the idea with the Force is that it's this pervasive thing that's everywhere, and it exists, in a sense of binding everybody together. And I was trying to convey that nirvana is really just the ground of our existence. That's ground of reality. That enlightenment is something that's already here. It's already part of us. The essence of reality, is who we are. It's our nature. So I'm leaning here towards Buddha nature. And so that was my attempt to try to tie these somewhat disparate ideas together in order to convey to the audience that that it's not something that we, and when we talk about enlightenment, we talk about nirvana. It's not something we work towards. It's not necessarily. It's not a goal. It's not something that we leave this place and go over here to get it. Or it's already here right now, and we just are practicing to reawaken to that.
Now, that was one of the things that perhaps I was most challenged by in the newer movies is the introduction of the midichlorians, because it seemed to take away from that all-pervasive forces being part of just the structure of the universe, and instead had it dependent on this thing, and you had an amount of them rather than it being one's ability to directly embed with the natural world. And did you have any particular reactions or with the midichlorians? I'm curious.
Well, I don't have a problem with the midichlorians because they are they're not the force. Midichlorians are microscopic life forms within us that help Jedi communicate with the force. So, and they also are a takeoff mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Actually, yeah. So, so I didn't really. I just saw it more as like getting kind of down into like this nitty gritty thing about cells, but cells are still the essence of nature and the nature of reality. The mitochondria are still as much nirvana, if you will, as the tree out here. But so I didn't have a problem from that perspective. And also, I think I imagine that the reason why George Lucas threw that in there was because he's trying to give some reason as to why Luke would be important in the later trilogy, so that if your father is strong in the Force, then you're going to be strong in the Force, and there's this kind of legacy there.
Yeah,
and that's why. But I didn't really see it as like, I know a lot of people felt like it was a very Star Trek moment, and kind of took away from the mysticism of the Force. But seeing that it's just a way of communication as opposed to the Force itself, I didn't have much problem with it.
So Matthew, since the book came out, what are some of the experiences you've had from that? Have discussions come up in the Buddhist centers with you about it, or have people written in saying, "Oh, I didn't really understand this Buddhist stuff, and this has helped a great deal"? What are some of the experiences you've had?
I surprisingly haven't had that many. I've got mostly people emailing me, and to say that they got into Buddhism because they read the book, and that is one of those things that make me click my heels together. It makes me very happy that I contributed to their lives in that way, because really that was the main reason I was able to finish the book, was like, well, maybe I can help some people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a bit of a shy person and bit of have a little bit of self-doubt when it comes to writing and things like that. So to be able to help somebody really, is a strong motivator. So I've gotten people write in telling me that, people with questions, and usually they're questions about their life, and I'm a little humbled by that, but I do my best to answer them and let them know my experiences, and maybe they can take something from what I've learned in my life and apply it to their own. And in Buddhist communities and so forth, a lot of my friends in the Thich Nhat Hanh community were very excited about it and very happy, and I got a lot of encouragement, and that felt good too, of course. And but since then, in the groups I've led and on just our our weekly practice or our retreats and so forth, it never really comes up too much, and I might make references here and there, but I usually try to talk more about, what's more salient to people's lives, and a lot of times the people that I've been in groups with might not be as obsessed with Star Wars as I am. So, we'll be talking about other things. But the book's been really great, and I'm really glad that I wrote it and that it did touch some people's lives, and hopefully got some people to go actually practice meditation and sit in with some groups and be around some teachers and develop that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. Our guest today has been Matthew Bortolin, and I'll have a link for both the book on the episode page for this and to Matthew's Facebook page. Matthew, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.